We'll do a quick tour of the garden and show you what else has been planted. And then we'll finish the day off by planting tomatoes. If you look over here, you see an example of an interplanted bed, lettuce and onions. And this is arugula, which the bugs absolutely love. So this lettuce will be harvested well before these onions are full size. So this is a way of maximizing space. Okay, now that's what we do with the soil blocks. Most of these plants were started with soil blocks. You'll see another bed over there with spinach, perpetual spinach, also soil blocks, Swiss chard, soil blocks. And this bed right here this is mixed lettuce. This was started from seed. I directly put the seed in the ground, and spinach, that's spinach along there. That needs to be weeded out. Okay, so these are two crops that don't like the intense heat. So hopefully within a few weeks they'll be ready. I noticed there's a lot of chomping going on. The bugs probably are having a slight field day. They tend to go after the more nutritious plants. They don't tend to go after lettuce. They tend to go after greens that are slightly bitter. So if you come over here, you'll see where we planted soil blocks and why we ran into a problem. This particular bed is planted with greens, various greens from China, Japan, India, and most of these plants would be huge and thriving by now. But somehow the slugs and the snails got in here and sort of wreaked havoc on these plants, and down that end they ate most of them. Okay, so if you're going to be a gardener, you have to be willing to have dismal experiences with failure. So at first I'm like, oh, the bugs, my plants, but then you react, okay? So on this plant, this is called tatsoi, you'll see there's little beetles on here that when I touch them, they jump off. They're called flea beetles, and they're eating all those little holes in the plants, okay? Yep, there they go. As soon as you touch them, they fly off, okay? Those are flea beetles. They will decimate that plant. So that's why we cover this bed with this agribond. Okay? We cover this with this agribond, but I'm not going to do it now because it's very hot. This keeps the temperature roughly 5 degrees warmer in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray these crops and the eggplant, because the flea beetles love the eggplant. I'm going to spray them with spinosad, which is a biological agent that kills the flea beetles, okay? And it's not supposed to be harmful. It's approved for organic methods. So that's what we're going to do there. All right, so coming over here, looking at this garden, you see 4 hills. 4 hills. These hills are roughly 3 feet apart. Each one of these hills, there's a different kind of summer squash or zucchini. This one was supposed to have 3, but obviously something ate the other one or it died, which is not a problem. This particular hill gets a little bit of shade, but now, by noontime, it's in full sun. Roughly 3 feet apart. These will get really big. These were planted with soil blocks. This will get really big, and you'll get an abundance of summer squash and zucchini. Okay, I don't normally eat that much of this particular crop, but I like to experiment with varieties. This one is called jackpot. That's a zucchini. And this one is Gentry, that's a yellow squash. This is Cocoselle, which is an old Italian zucchini, and that's Raven, another dark zucchini, very productive. In between these hills are planted nasturtiums. Nasturtiums, okay? These are edible leaves, edible flowers. So these leaves are really tasty if you put them in a salad. If you go to high-end restaurants, hoity-toity restaurants, they're gonna have nasturtium leaves and flowers, okay? Slightly spicy, very good. So they supposedly help to keep some of the bugs away from this zucchini. This was covered with the Agribon, like this bed back here, because I'm really afraid of rabbits eating everything in this garden. We have a serious problem with rabbits, and I'm hoping, somebody said they sighted a bobcat around here. I'm hoping the bobcat gets the rabbits. And so I've been covering things up, but I don't want this to be too hot. So I uncovered these. So these really thrived since we had quite a bit of rain the other day. Okay, under this bed right here is another crop I started when it was a little bit cool out, and this crop doesn't necessarily like cool weather, damp weather, and this is string beans. Okay, so I planted these under the Agribon, preparing the bed the same way I prepared the other beds that I showed you recently. Okay, and this has holes in it, but mainly I'm not too worried about the bugs getting in here. I'm mainly worried about the rabbits coming and the heat being maintained. So I haven't covered this in probably a week or so, and you can see all the beans are sprouting. Now I'll thin these beans out when I get a chance to be about 2 inches apart, and you'll get an abundance of beans in a bed this size. There are 4 varieties here. This one is Maasai Bush Haricot Vert, which is a French sort of a thin bean. This is Provida, which is an old standby, great bean. Those are wax beans, Indy Gold. And this one is also just a regular garden bean. Here's an invasive species. I don't know what this is called, but it is everywhere. And it's sort of like an onion-like plant, but it's sort of a pain in the neck, so I'm always pulling that out. So that's your beans. Now, typically, I would also interplant something in there while the beans are getting bigger. So maybe I'll put some more lettuce in there. All right, lastly, this is an onion. These were onion seeds. These were started from seeds, okay? So there's all onions planted in here. You can see they're not quite as far along as the onion sets. So these were started from seeds in soil blocks and transplanted. This over here are some beets, okay, and they look like they're also possibly getting eaten. So there are a lot of living creatures that want to eat your food. So get used to it, unless you want to spray toxic chemicals, which I don't want to do, and I encourage you not to want to do that. Okay, so you might have to replant, you might have to cover with remay, you might have to spray a non-toxic organic pesticide, whatever you choose to do. Okay, over here we have the asparagus bed. This asparagus bed, this is a perennial bed, so I planted this 16 years ago, so this is 16 years old. The first 2 years or so of asparagus, you don't want to be picking very many of them at all. You want to let them get established. And you can see the asparagus come maybe beginning of May, end of April, and they go into June, well into June. And you get so many asparagus. So you can see right here, these are ready to be harvested. I simply break them off And I have our lunch right here. Beautiful organic asparagus. Okay, if you don't harvest them, and you let them get really tall, they start to go to seed. Okay, you can see this feathery looking guy right here. That's an asparagus that's going to seed. Okay, so if you don't come out and harvest these, they get so tall they want to reproduce. So those little skinny ones, I'm not going to harvest those. They're not very edible. You want to get the fatter ones. So I'm going to let those grow a little bit bigger. This one I'll take, and this one I'll take because it's getting way too big, and I'll take that one over there. And in another couple of days, I'll have more asparagus. So we've eaten probably 5 or 6 meals already, if not more, from asparagus. We've given some to our neighbors. So in an area this size, you can grow an incredible amount of asparagus. They need really rich soil. So I try to add compost every year, and I put the straw down. And then once they get big, like ferny, like asparagus ferns, that's a good thing. And then in the early spring, you cut down all that dead growth and they come right back. Okay, so that's asparagus. Over here, lastly, we have, this is kale from last year. This overwintered, so this kale needs to be harvested. It's going to seed. It's sending up flower shoots, so it wants to go to seed. And if you get closer, you'll really notice the flea beetles love kale, which tells you something about kale. It's really good for you. Well, in between the kale is perpetual spinach. And I notice already on the perpetual spinach that probably leaf miners are getting in these leaves. If you see that leaf, it's got a mottled look on it. And there's a very good chance that inside this leaf, there's a little worm. And now some of you get grossed out by that, but if you were a worm, here it is. A leaf miner. They literally mine the leaves. I don't know if the camera can catch that. See that tiny little, see him? He's gonna eat through that leaf. Okay, that's called a leaf miner. They love spinach, they love perpetual spinach, they love beet leaves. Okay, so they're a real problem in these, amongst this particular crop. So what I'm gonna do for those is I'm gonna spray the spinosad. Again, I'm gonna spray the spinosad to deal with the flea beetles and the leaf miners. Okay, try not to spray very much of that stuff. Even though it's approved for organic farming, it still kills things. So all of those blueberries, that's the blueberry patch over there. The blueberry patch was sprayed twice with spinosad, and the blueberry shrubs are loaded with flowers, So I don't want to spray that any longer because the pollinators, the spinosad is not very good for pollinators. Okay. All right, so I think we'll end that session, take a break, and we'll come back and plant some tomatoes. Thank you.